She had to put me through that.
Yeah, I think we all had, I know I had problems with it.
I think
It was tricky.
no, we're live now, folks.
Yeah,
I
we're
see
on,
that.
we're
Okay.
being recorded now.
Okay,
Thank you for the heads up.
thank you. And how is our attendance? I see Ian, Cynthia, Dave, Celeste. Do we have Rachel? Are we getting Rachel today? No?
Rachel's here.
Hello.
And she is.
Oh, good.
Here. I was waiting to get in.
Perfect. And what about Rebecca? I haven't, has anyone heard from Rebecca? I didn't.
Nope, I haven't.
Okay. Anyway, we're going to call this meeting to order. This is Finance Committee meeting. We will begin by acknowledging that we are privileged to meet on the traditional territory of the Squamish, Lilwat, and St'át'imc nations. And with that having been said, it's time to approve the agenda.
That-
Go
That
ahead.
the
Ian.
agenda of this meeting be approved.
Thanks. Seconder for that one?
I'll
Speak up.
second it. I'll
Thank
second
you. Good. And is there anyone opposed to the adoption of the agenda? All right, then we are moving down. I haven't received any trustee items, so I assume there's none for finance, no presentations, and that takes us down to Mo on the selection process for the new auditors.
Rick,
Okay,
you forgot the minute.
What did I forget? Oh, minutes. Thank you for
Number
catching that. Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Rachel, and move that?
Sure, that the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held on December 9th, 2020 be approved.
They're already approved.
Actually,
They're already approved.
see,
So-
this time, by complete good luck, I was doing the right thing when I skipped over the minutes.
Oh, you were? Okay, we'll forget that one.
However, that does not indicate any great insight on my part. It was still inadvertent, but they've already been approved. They're just there for information. So
Okay.
past trustees, presentations, and back to Mo.
Okay, sorry, before I get going, I think Archie had something to say, but is Rebecca going to be joining us later or?
She mentioned that she has something to do, but she will be on soon.
Okay,
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 thank you.
so she'll be joining us in a bit, hopefully.
All right.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So just a quick update about the selection process of the auditors. Where today is the last day where RFPs, request for proposals, are due. And so far I have 3 where the team now needs to evaluate and shortlist. And we will keep the board up to date on where we're at with the process. With that said, we are in accordance to our time schedule and our timeline. So we don't anticipate any delays.
Great. Any questions for Mo on that? All right, that takes us down to Mr. Hughes. Welcome, Ralph, and quarterly financial report.
Hello, Rick and trustees. Yeah, quarterly financial report. So this was to the end of December and reflects the numbers that we reported to the Ministry of Education. Just noting there the revenues at $22,755,000 on the operating fund as compared to expenditures of $22,597 for just a slight operating surplus of $158,000. So we're just looking here for anything that might be out of line, and it all looks good at this point in time. And that's about serves the purpose of the quarterly financial report to the end of December.
Great. Let's just see if there's any questions from trustees on the quarterly financial report. Thanks, Ralph. Nope, hearing none. We'll move down to discussion items. And Mo, the first one is yours, partner group meeting planning.
Yes,
And
thank
trustees,
you,
we
Rick.
see that you have a couple of attachments on that.
Okay, thank you, Rick. So the first item in the partner group meeting planning is Lisa, Jen, and I worked on infographics that's basically tailored after the IAP2 infographics. Lisa, do you want to just spell out what the acronym means for IEP2?
The IEP2 is a public participation, an organization that promotes public participation and advises the federal government. And we use it often when the board asks us to go out and engage with the public to be more clear about what we're trying to accomplish, so that we don't let the board down when we bring information back, and so that we use the right verbiage and language with the public so they don't feel misled in the intentions. So things like the difference between consulting and collaborating or informing are very important to ensure we're being honest and straightforward with the public, and to ensure you get what you need. So we've modeled the the budget development process under that the best we can. This is a draft, and we do need to shore it up a little bit more, but we did want to bring it to you so you could see how it was being modeled that way.
Okay, so with that said, just to kind of quickly go over this, I'm assuming that the board has had a chance, hopefully, to go over this. I know we did send it a little bit late, but overall, the arrow there depicts kind of the time frame that we're working in for our budget development process. And as you know, we started in December and we go all the way up to June and continue actually in the summertime too. And it starts off with basically, when it comes to the public side of this, is the information, is to inform. And basically, how's that done? It's basically to inform them that there is going to be a partner group meeting about the strategic vision, about the education plan, and basically just some high-level information about the budget development process. And as you guys know, during the board meeting, which is public, and the finance committee meeting too, which is public, in December, I walked the board through a detailed timeline, or Ralph did, of what that budget development process would look like. So essentially, this is kind of touching on that milestone. And some of the examples of how we're doing that is basically through ongoing communications around our educational plan, releasing the spring budget snapshots, having information on our website when it comes to the finance committee, having the SD48 annual budget development survey released, obviously information going towards the PACs, DPACs, and then staff meetings when it comes to the principals and explaining to their staff or working with them about the upcoming budget development process. When it comes to consulting, it's basically it's collecting input towards the annual establishment of our budget. And essentially the big milestone there is the budget development survey that the board has later on in this agenda item to go over. And then the collaborating would be the milestone of the actual partner group meeting happening. And essentially with a focus for the partner groups to be touching base on and helping prioritize and collating the survey results and basically going from there. So it helps us with kind of our priorities. And, you know, it's because obviously we may have 100 different needs coming up, and maybe out of that 50 functional needs. So it's important that we have our partner groups help us prioritize that. And then right after that, basically work with our school principals and line directors, because it's site-based budgeting, obviously, to come up with draft budget plans. And essentially some of the things they'll be focusing on, and kind of hopefully will be aligned with some of the needs that are coming up when it comes to key themes that are as a result of the partner group meeting prioritization. And once again, some examples of collaboration include the actual partner group meeting, obviously the board meetings, which we're having right now and going over the survey inputs, basically issuing our preliminary site-based budgeting workbooks to our schools, and basically having our school alignment meetings, which is all about priorities and alignment to our educational plan and our needs and stuff like that, and going from there. The next step would be to consider So it's basically, okay, well, now you have all your priorities established and, collated. We've had a chance to bring it by our various staff members and the board and all that stuff. Now it's to consider the priorities, more importantly, when it comes from the partner group meetings and help and triangulate where some basically the sources of information and basically helping us triangulate also what some of those needs are that are actually related to the budget, because there might be several different solutions to a problem, and maybe one of them might be additional resources or whatever. So we absolutely have to consider that. And in addition, we also have to consider other district needs too as they come up. For example, when it comes to the whole COVID pandemic, that came up in April, halfway through our spring budget development process. And we really had to fine tune that in fall. So it's a perfect example of that. And some of the examples of the consider stage would be obviously public input, essentially touching on the public input and basically the partner group meeting when it comes to triangulating the information. Once again, going back to the board, the results of the partner group meeting and their priorities, and then basically touching base with our educational leaders or school principals, etc., to update them about further progress to the prioritization of the partner group meeting needs, other district needs coming back from the schools, all that stuff, and having a very kind of a thorough conversation during Ed Leadership Team meeting about different type of solutions and what different schools are doing and all that stuff. Okay, so all of this eventually leads to decision making, because at some point you would have to kind of press a trigger and make decisions and have it incorporated as part of your budget or not. So with that said, a key milestone there would be the annual budget bylaw that basically the board approves in June. And obviously the last couple of years, what we've been doing is we've been having the first reading in May. We've been evolving it very similarly to the fall budget also, similarly how we did in December, and then evolving it when it comes to any changes coming back to the board in June, and in this case in February for the final budget bylaw reading. Okay, and basically example is the spring budget bylaw. And then right after that, what do? Well, it doesn't stop from there. Now it's monitoring the results. And what do we mean by that? Basically submitting the budget bylaw first to the Ministry of Education, then basically communicating the budget bylaw to our various communities by posting it on our websites, etc., and then monitoring how we're doing when it comes to our educational plan, which is basically similar to that time or roughly around there. The educational team gives some updates about where they're at with some of the metrics and stuff like that. And some key examples include essentially revising the site-based budgeting workbooks for the results, because obviously you may have to amend your budgets, or you will probably, which typically happens all throughout the fall. Issuing the budget infographics to help our public understand where our money is going, how much money we're collecting, how much is it for operating, how many students do we have, what's the breakdown between resources and basically salaries, etc. Evaluating your prior year financial statements, not only for how did you do when it comes to budgets to actuals, but also what was a surplus, hopefully not deficit, but what was a surplus going into the next year. So now you could fine tune your budget workbooks going into the fall. And then also ensuring that the information on our website is updated, including having the budget bylaw and all the supporting information posted on there. For example, all the information you'll have later on during this finance committee meeting, we have all the supporting documentation public, and it essentially helps everyone reconcile almost on a line-to-line basis where our budget is being allocated towards when it comes to funding. So with that said, I highly recommend the trustees just to go over this alone sometimes and understand this infographics and just see if there's any questions or any clarity that's needed. Obviously, this is our first year doing this, Similarly to the budget summary infographics, we're going to evolve this every single year as we progress to this new type of evolution that we're doing when it comes to surveys and additional consultation, etc. So before I get to the other partner group meeting items, I just wanted to just pass it on to the trustees to find out what are your thoughts about the infographics? Is there any comments? Do you understand the purpose, etc.?
Any comments, anybody?
I thought it looked really clear, Mo. Thank you.
Yep, should clear up any confusion people have about the process, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. Should we move down to item 6A-B, meeting agenda?
Yeah, sure. So just really quickly, you guys have as a hyperlink the meeting agenda, so I'm not going to post it on the screen right now. So overall, the biggest difference between last year and this year, there's two things. Number one, obviously we'll be meeting on Zoom. Okay, so it's a virtual meeting. And number two, we're changing the direction a little bit, so it's more aligned. Before, there wasn't really a purpose of the budget development survey. It was supposed to kind of give ideas, but even then there wasn't a lot of information. But now the biggest change is we're going to be releasing the raw details if the board thinks it's acceptable to, and there isn't anything additional to censor out and all that stuff, to the partner group meeting, partner groups in confidence, with the whole intention of that evening being to prioritize those survey details in each section to your top three, what's working good, but more of a top three on functional needs. And then right after that, basically the partner groups having a chance to go around on a virtual type of a Padlet, okay? And essentially looking at what all the top three themes are coming back from each group. Okay, so that's kind of the biggest shift, is a focus on that survey now. Okay, so with that said, the agenda includes obviously welcome introductions, an overview of the budget development process, overview of our educational plan, which is our key guiding document to our budget development and ensuring alignment with it. And then majority of the activity would be table talk activities. So essentially, it's the working group opening and reviewing the raw data that's in the survey. Individuals by section, individuals then putting down by section their thoughts, and then collaborating as a group on a table and prioritizing your top three thoughts with administrative council member, admin council members kind of leading the facilitation in each group out of the 5 tables. And then right after that, having a virtual walkabout for everyone to go around that virtual Padlet to see what all the themes are and what each group came up with. And then ending the day with closing remarks, not only from Rick and Lisa and myself, but also any additional things that might come up from any one of our partner group members as a result of that meeting. So it's not necessarily around feedback, because that might happen after a survey, a feedback survey being sent out. It's more for around, okay, what's emergent for us to know right now that, came about and we basically, we need to consider or whatever, right? And that's about it. The meeting would be on February 17th, and it'll be from 5 to 7:20 p.m.
Okay.
Okay, that's the
Any questions or comments on that proposed agenda? Okay. Thank you, Mo. And I know that it won't be just you that worked on that. So thank you to the rest of the staff that's been thinking about that so carefully so that we have a successful partner group meeting. Mo, did you want to talk about the survey results?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to do is at this time, I'm not going to share my screen. Archie sent all of the trustees a very organized PDF that's broken down by first a summary and then broken down by the summary of the question, then the details of the question, when it comes to responding to information. And then it has page numbers and all that stuff. So because right now, we don't, like, even though we reviewed this information for sensitivity and all that stuff, but in reality, this is meant for the partner groups only. I feel that what we could do is we could either go through each question and just kind of touch on very high level thoughts, or we could just open it up right away to the trustees for any feedback and all that stuff, because I know there's a lot of information there that we need to take into consideration. But one of the feedback that I think would be good for us would be, okay, aside from one thing I noticed for Don Ross was mentioned, is there any other places where you feel that the comments are not appropriate? Because I know in council and Archie, we did a lot of work on reviewing it and kind of making it more holistic and taking out any type of inappropriate comments, or whether it's referring to someone personally or whatever, and also taking out individual schools and replacing it by the school, etc. And overall, there were about 17 different areas where I had to make, for the most part, change the school name to the school, so school isn't being identified, and 2 or 3 inappropriate comments that I had to remove because it was referring to individual staff members or something like that, completely inappropriate. But aside from that, was there anything else in this survey that the trustees feel should not be posted because as it's going to the partner groups? So I'm not sure how you guys want to do this. Do you want to go through it question by question and just kind of open it up for feedback, or do you want to just open it up to the board for feedback?
Let's just open it up for feedback. On the other hand, the board hasn't had that in front of them for all that long, have they?
No.
I take my guidance from the board. What would the other trustees like to do? I mean,
Rick, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think given what Mo has just said, I'd like to just spend a little bit more time, and my preference would be emailing any feedback at another time if that's possible.
I'm good with that. Mo, does that work for you?
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, and any objection from the other trustees on that?
Nope.
No, that makes sense to me because it gives everybody the chance to delve into it as deeply as they want to. And Celeste's absolutely right. If you're going to go into it at all, you're going to need some significant time, I think. So.
Okay, so just one thing, keeping in mind that any good survey is critical, right? So just keeping in mind, obviously, I know that you guys have skimmed through this and you're going to find information in there, and that's what we're asking for. We're asking for feedback. So I just don't be surprised if there's could be themes and feedback. That's good because it's giving us more information, but it's just more for like, oh, well, this staff member or something that's just not appropriate. But for the most part, we reviewed it. With that said, if I could just request that just everyone has had a chance to just take one last look at it by the end of the week, that'll be great, because the next steps are Archie is going to be releasing an email today for the partner group meeting agenda, for basically the infographics, for basically anything like that, and the placemat. But what she will do is she will then send more information out when it comes to the actual survey itself, along with mentioning that's confidential for partner groups eyes only, probably on Monday. So hopefully the trustees could review it by Friday and give me any feedback.
Okay, so we'll make that a fairly strong request, is that if you intend to provide any feedback on this survey to Mo, please do it before end of business on Friday. Thank you. Anything else on that item from trustees?
Nope.
Anything else from you, Mo?
No.
Okay, that will take us down to action items. And that's Mo and Ralph.
Okay, thank you, Rick. So as you know, earlier I mentioned that our budget development process goes through a number of phases. And one of the changes we made as of recently, couple of years, was that in the past, we used to have all three, the number one, waiving the requirement for all three readings, okay, to be done in different times, and then having all three readings being done in the same sitting, and that being basically closer to when our deadline is, of when we're required to submit it to the ministry. So the first one being, we used to do it in June, and then we used to do it in February. Now what we did was we put in, okay, well, we'll have the first reading in May for the initial budget, and then we'll have the first reading for the amended fall budget in December. So as you know, in December, the board did do the first reading for the amended budget bylaw. And that first reading consisted of basically in detail, what were our revised operating and special purpose funds. Didn't really touch on capital. Okay, so in reality, this version of the budget bylaw now, so the second and third reading, which the board will be doing today, hopefully, is that it's going to be touching on the same amendments that we talked about in December for the operating and special purpose funds. Okay, and then it'll be throwing in the addition of the amended capital fund budget bylaw also. So it's a budget bylaw holistically today that the board will be approving. So I wanted to, before I even get there, I wanted to just quickly give changes, because that's what we committed to. If the board was going to do a reading, they want to know what the changes were, if there were significant changes coming in into the second and the third reading. Okay, so in reality, when it comes to the operating and special purpose fund, there's only been $40,000 in minor changes when it comes to staffing adjustments and all that stuff that we've been talking with the board about in past compared to what we presented in December. Okay, so that's pretty small, because just to kind of break that down, the average teacher salary plus benefits is over $100,000 now. Right, so that's 0.4 FTE roughly. Okay, so that's not, it's not material. So just a very high level debrief about what those changes were, not the 40,000, but cumulatively what the changes were when it comes to the operating and special purpose funds. So we had overall, which we talked about in December, we had overall 42 FTE additional students, equating to $430,000, okay? We had increases in the special needs funding, which was redistributed back to our schools, in the addition of $1.3 million, which we talked about in December also. There was the teacher labor settlement, which was for the revised collective agreements, and obviously the government committing to help us subsidize any increased costs for teacher labor costs in salaries and all that stuff for $1.3 million, totaling $3 million. So out of the $3.3 million, I broke down the key areas deriving the $3 million in changes compared to from the spring to the fall budget from our operating fund. Okay, from our special purpose fund, which we also touched on in December, to just to kind of summarize again, there was 850,000 that was coming from the federal funding for COVID back to class fund, okay, which we talked about in detail how we're funding that. Note that the second installment of that payment was just approved recently, even though we've budgeted for the full amount. Our budget only reflects the first installment, both in revenues and expenses, because we're required to match what our grant allocation tables are. And the government still hasn't updated the grant allocation tables. So right now it's unfortunate because the budget bylaw is due in February. So in reality, that's going to be a key variance. It's going to be $1 million variance that I'm just passing on to the board right now that will have an additional revenues and expenses going into the budgets to actuals. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. And the reason why we haven't put that in our budget bylaw is because the government hasn't updated the grant tables yet. So we're not allowed to. There was additional around $330,000 for, once again, COVID, but from provincial funding. And majority of that's for supporting custodian operations and a small chunk for technology. Basically, there was an additional, which we touched on, $700,000 for additional classroom enhancement fund needs that we applied for and we received. So over totaling, right now, totaling $1.9 million in additional special purpose funding that our fall budget includes. And note that the overall difference between special purpose funding from the spring to the fall was $1,962,000. So I've touched on everything but $62,000. So in reality, what does that mean? That means that we have an operating budget of $64.3 million as laid out in the infographics that we shared with the board. Okay, overall, if we're looking at our special purpose, our operating and our capital funds, our budget is $72 million. Okay, what does that mean? That means that we have 4,998 or 5,000 headcount students, equating to 5,350 FTE. As you know, our funding is driven by FTE. As you can see in the infographics, every single year, obviously our enrollments are increasing, so are our revenues, so are our expenditures. It's all related. Okay. When it comes to staffing costs, it's very similar to prior years. 82% of our costs are related to salaries and benefits. 18% are related to resources. What does that mean? It means supplies and services, transportation of students, and other necessary expenses such as insurance and utilities. And this is a key part for the board to know. Almost the entirety of our budget is non-discretionary, meaning it's already allocated to specific needs. And then basically the rest of the graphs in the infographics, the pie charts, show basically just a breakdown of where our budgets are when it comes to schools versus maintenance and transportation versus educational support, versus our district versus our contingency. Okay, so one thing consistent is in December, we ended up with a $700,000 contingency as part of the first reading, and we're still having an unallocated contingency of $700,000. And I think in prior meetings, we've explained to the board why we need an unallocated contingency for things that we cannot predict right now. So we need money there in case we have to allocate funds and it's an emergency or if it's a new need. So with that said, that's the overall budget presentation, and we're recommending that the board approves the second and third reading of the budget bylaw. The finance committee approves it as presented.
Thank you. I think that you see a motion. When do you want us to make this motion, Mo?
So unless, obviously first, I'm not sure if there's any questions or anything like that, but.
Yeah, let's open it up for questions to start with. Okay, seeing none. What do you want to do next, Mo?
I think we're good for the motion now.
Okay. I don't have the motion in front of me, but I bet you somebody does.
I could go ahead and read the motion if you would like.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
That the Finance Committee recommend the Board of Education approve the 2020-2021 amended annual budget as presented.
Thank you. Seconder for that?
Profit.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Or any opposed? All right, then that's carried. And is there anything else? I think that's the end of the business for the finance meeting. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, So I just wanted to say Rebecca was in the waiting room while I was presenting. So
Oh, okay.
Rebecca, my apologies. I'm not sure how long you've been waiting for, but you missed a meeting. I apologize about that. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, hi, welcome, Rebecca. In that case, the business having been completed, if there are no objections to adjourn, I'm pausing for objections. Then I will declare us adjourned, and that leaves us about 9.5 or 8.5 minutes before the start of the committee of the whole meeting at 2 p.m.
And then we need to log back in anyway, right?
You'll have to log back into that specific meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Can we stay on the line here now, Rick? Or do we have to log out?
No, I think you have to, I'll get Mo to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have to log out of this one and into a separate,
Okay, yep.
a separate link to the next meeting. Correct, Mo?
Correct. Yes.
He's giving you that sign.